Hey, it's Steven, one of the hosts of TRUTALKS with TRUMOTION. This is a post-production edit. When Sensei Mark and I were recording this episode, we had a effect on, and you may notice it, a bit of an echo. I ask you to just be patient with us as we figure this out. Thank you so much, and enjoy the episode.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday for our first ever True Talk with TruMotion. My name is Mark, joined here by Steven. And today's topic, we would like to talk about accountability and responsibility. Now, in the realm of martial arts, which is what we're mainly into right now, we both teach martial arts at TruMotion Martial Arts in South Jordan, Utah. When we're talking about accountability and responsibility, I see a lot of that within our students in terms of we need to help them with that. They are lacking in accountability and responsibility. And I feel like if our students are lacking in accountability and responsibility, then that might be more of just a here problem and more of an everywhere problem. Would that be something you would agree with, Stephen?
I think that if we're seeing that with our students are a good sample size of the population around us, so at least in our population around us, then that's definitely something that would be affecting everybody.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that because I think today as a society, we have gotten away from accountability and responsibility. Like a perfect example is, I hate to be that whole back when I was a kid, this is blah, 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 blah. But it's true. When I was a kid and you got in trouble from your school teacher, you were terrified to go home because not only did you get in trouble from your school teacher, but you got in trouble from your parents too. So it was like a double whammy. And you don't really see that anymore because I don't know what it is with our newer generation of parents, and I'm not blaming any certain section of parents. Parents are going to parent the way they want to, but we're not allowing the kids to take responsibility for their actions. So if they got in trouble at home, instead of running to the teacher and hopping all over the teacher and being like, why did you get mad at my child? And they're a perfect angel. They don't do anything wrong. You need to really just be like, okay, the teacher had a reason to get upset with you. What was the reason? Oh, so you were misbehaving in class. Okay, that's good to know. We need to correct that sort of behavior. But by taking away that accountability from the children at such a young age, when they become adults and they enter the workforce and they don't turn in a work assignment when it's due. I mean, Stephen, you just got out of corporate America. Like, what happens when you don't turn in a work assignment or a project on its due date?
Sometimes you wish for getting beat, but it's escalations. It's getting talked to by superiors. It's bringing in other groups. Like, who needs to address this? The accountability does fall in a more group responsibility in corporate USA, but it definitely comes down to you you're the one holding the email that needs to be sent. Well, you better send it.
So that's something again we've just noticed from within our own students, and how we can attest that from our own students is just their skill level. So when they come in for their lessons, we teach them their stuff, they go home, the next week they come back. If they took accountability and responsibility for their training, they would come back with that information kind of locked in and ready to go to learn more information for the following week, which necessarily isn't always the case. I mean, that is for some people, but a lot of times we'll see that the kids will come back in, and I shouldn't say kids, adults as well. They'll come back in and be like, all right, let's review what we did last week. And they just stare at you with a blank look, and they're like, well, I forgot. It's like, okay, all right, I understand that. People forget. But it's like, why did we forget? Is it because we didn't really practice at home? Well, I was really busy. Well, I understand that. Everybody has busy lives and, a lot of stuff going on in today's society. But at the same time, if you want to get better at something, you've got to take accountability and responsibility for that action or that skill level. So that is where I know that is something all of us, and I'm talking to myself with this too. I mean, there's always things that I start doing, and all of a sudden I catch myself and be like, yeah, I'm saying those same excuses. I need to shut up and be like, all right, I just didn't do it, and that's why it's not very good. So now the key is how can we start instilling that into our society again? How do we start instilling accountability and responsibility within our students, within our family, within ourselves that could make potential long-lasting changes? The first thing I would automatically think of is find somebody to hold you accountable. Because if you're just planning on trying to make yourself accountable the whole time, there is a very, very select few of people in this world that will hold their feet to the fire and hold themselves accountable to the highest standard possible and not waver. And those people, you want to find and you want to make them your best friend. Why? Because if they're willing to hold themselves to it and you talk to them and be like, hey, I need you to hold me accountable, they will definitely hold you accountable to whatever it is that you want to achieve and become. I guess the second version is just educating people. So when it comes to accountability and responsibility, maybe sometimes they just don't know. Maybe they were never taught that. Maybe it wasn't in their family life, or when did you really start to see what accountability and responsibility was within you personally, Stephen, with you growing up?
With being responsible, I learned that just a few years ago, really, realizing that for me, it's my course is in my own hands. I'm one of those people that I like to hold myself accountable, but I like to make sure others around me are at the same level. And being able to have that feeling for me is just a sense of security. I'm surrounding myself with people that I know won't let me down, but also I know that I need to work on myself to make sure I don't let me down. It's a muscle. It's definitely something that you have to practice, and you can start by being accountable with very mundane things like taking out the trash, doing chores, following up on what you said you would do.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree with that as well. I feel like I started learning that, or started seeing really that accountability and responsibility, is when I started getting very serious into high school athletics. I had a coach who I don't talk to as much as I should, but I still talk to him to this day. His name's John Scott, Coach Scott. He really started to instill that accountability and responsibility within all of his athletes. And it was simple things, and it sounds like discipline, and it is a form of discipline, where if practice was at 6 a.m., he would show up and he'd put the timer on, and if you weren't on the floor, dressed, ready to go by 6 a.m., you were late. And if you were late, you ran. And everybody hates running. And it doesn't matter if there was an accident on the road, or if you got into a car accident, or you had a heart attack on the way to practice. If you were late for practice, you were late for practice. None of this whole I was late because of blah, blah, blah. It's like, you were late. It's only yes or no. Were you on time? No. Okay, then you're late. So now you got to run. So that is something that he instilled in us as athletes from the first day I met him. And he would hold people accountable to that. And he had standards and he had expectations. And if you didn't meet those, he would let you know about it, and he gave you an opportunity to fix it. So like another thing is he was a no facial hair type coach, so you couldn't grow any kind of facial hair during the basketball season.
Oh, wow.
So obviously I like facial hair. I have a beard and all that stuff, so I used to want to try to grow it all the time. No, he was not down with that. So if you came in and it was like stubby and scratchy on your face, you could go up and shave, or you could start running. Those were your two options: go up and shave or start running.
Did you have to run more if you had more facial hair?
It was just pretty much standard across the board, because nobody was able to let it get super long, because it's like if you had a 5 o'clock shadow, you were running. Yeah, it was. That's just kind of how he was. And again, it was like, well, I woke up too late. Well, I don't care. You should have thought of that beforehand. So that's when I really started to learn that accountability and responsibility, and it's translated in through the rest of my adult life and into, running a dojo and being responsible for students and all that stuff. So I feel like that's probably one of my biggest hopes. I feel like trying to get across to students is like what you were saying earlier. Your life and your rewards and your wants are in your hands. So if there is something that you want to obtain, like again, coming from the martial arts world, if you want to get a black belt, the only person that's going to help you get a black belt is you. I will be your guide, and I will walk the trail with you, but ultimately I can't carry you up the trailhead to get your black belt. You got to take the steps to get it yourself. And that's one thing to where it's like you can see who's determined to get it and who's not. Because I've had students, they've gone from white to black. I think probably the fastest one that'll go from white to black will probably be Luke.
Okay.
He's a 17-year-old kid. He goes to Bingham High School, which is a local high school here in South Jordan. He's got crazy work ethic, and his goal is to get his black belt before he goes on his LDS mission, which will be next summer, I believe, or this coming summer. So he's almost there. He started it right when COVID started, so 2020, and he will get his black belts before. Actually, no, it'll probably be early 2024. So about 4 years it took him to go from white to black, which is one of the faster people that I've ever had. Most of the time it's anywhere from like 3 to 5 years. On average, it's about 5 years. And then I've had students where it took them 10 plus years to get to black. So it's how bad do you want it? Ultimately it's up to you. And like you were saying, you've really kind of taken that whole destiny within your own hands. What is it recently that you feel like you can kind of point to your finger and be like, that was the moment where you're like, yeah, I'm done with this. This is the direction I need to go. Do you have any kind of like stories or insights on that?
Well, to relate to when you learned to be accountable, I had a very similar awakening regarding timeliness. One of my earlier jobs, it was downtown, and I would, give myself 30 minutes to get from where I lived downtown. That was not enough time. I would show up late. I would run into things. I took public transportation, and my thing was, well, the train was running late. That didn't stop them from writing me up 2 times. And then I realized, well, I kind of need this job. I need this. And I made a decision that it's like, okay, I'll get off the couch earlier. I'll take the earlier train, and I'll get into town with plenty of time. So even if that train's delayed, he'll still make it before my shift starts. That was a wake-up moment for me. Honestly, that was one of the things that is like, I would say, an accountability renaissance. Because before then, I didn't really have any discipline. I would get up. I'm like, oh, I got this job. I'm sort of resting on my laurels. But it would be an impediment to me because I would be late. I wouldn't take it seriously. I wouldn't respect it. I realized it's something I drug my feet to, if that's the right phrase. So that's really a big one that stands out to me, and I was just reminded of it with your example. Another one really is a career shift, being able to say, I'm at this point in my life where I want to do this as a career, I want to take this seriously. That's a huge accountability renaissance, because now it's like, okay, do I have the appropriate tools? Do I have the appropriate knowledge and know-how to be successful here, regardless of what it is? Am I willing to put in the work to get to where I need to be?
That's another key one right there, is the responsibility to put in the work. A lot of times, I mean, we're in such a society where everything is such instant gratification, and if it's not within days, oh my gosh, what are we doing? I mean, as much as I love having like next day shipping and like, you know, stuff just magically appears on your front doorstep and this and that, I mean, it's made us inherently lazy as a society. And we expect everything just now. And there's something to be said for walking that harder path and really having it take time and developing the patience to continue on when you're like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for X amount of years, and like, oh, I don't, blah, blah, blah. Because you see it in not only just martial arts, but in the workforce. I mean, how many people are changing careers every 2 or 3 years? I mean, is it because they're bad at their job? No, they get impatient with they're not where they want to be within their career, or you know, somebody looked at them funny and they're like, this job is awful. This person like gave me the weird eye, and I can't work here. This place is toxic. And instead of like, okay, well, that was a weird experience. Like, let's move on. People want everything to be instantaneous. And I think that's one of the greatest things about the martial arts and how we can really help change society in terms of developing that patience, because you are not going to go from white to black within a year time, at least not here with us. I mean, that'll never happen. I can't speak for everybody, but with us, you have to learn how to develop patience, because it will take time, it will take effort. Can it go faster? Yeah, if you put in the work. If you put in the work and you put in the time and you put in the effort, it could go a lot faster. If you don't put in the time, you don't put in the work, and you just show up, showing up is the first step. Now you actually have to do stuff. Yeah, then it may take you a lot longer, but it's what you want. So if you want it, then you know what you have to do to go get it. And that is one thing that I really feel like we'll be able to really have our finger on the pulse here in the dojo, with really teaching the students, adults, children, everybody, that patience and being responsible for their own actions. Because kind of like what you alluded to earlier, Stephen, with like you wanted to take your destiny within your own hands. That's true with everything that you do in life, whether or not you're working for someone else, working for yourself, going to school. If you want something within that time frame, you're the only one that can put in the work to go get it. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I was more flexible. I look at everybody that's kicking to the head and I get so envious and angry, and it's like, why can't I kick to the head? And it's like, okay, well, how often do you stretch? Well, I don't stretch. Well, then don't complain about not being able to kick to the head, because it's not going to happen. Or if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do as many push-ups as other people. I hate it. They're so strong. Why am I so weak? I want to be able to do that. Be like, okay, well, how many push-ups do you practice outside of the dojo? Well, none. Well, then don't complain about not being able to do very many push-ups. It's like, you can't complain if you're not putting in the work. Okay, and here's the truth. It's funny because when you do put in the work, you tend not to complain. It's actually very interesting that way. I've noticed that people that really put in work, and you can probably attest to this too, Stephen, the kids and the students that put in the work are the least likely to complain. Okay, and the ones that don't put in the work, they're always whining and talking about how they this or that, and they want this or they want that, or why am I not a different rank, and all that stuff.
Can we do something besides work for our private lesson?
Yeah, exactly.
Things like that.
Exactly. Can we do a drill today? Can we play snake? Can we do the ball drill? Or yeah, exactly. They'll ask you to do everything else except what they know they need to do to put in the work. And at sometimes you just have to be like, okay, well, you do know if we do this, that's going to set this back. And we have to, and that's another thing we have to explain to people that want to do weapons as well. They're like, well, can I just do weapons during my normal lesson? Well, you can, but you do realize that by doing that, your other material is going to suffer. So it's like, what do you want? Do you want to be good at weapons, or do you want your regular material to be okay? So that's something that I definitely think we can have a direct impact right away, not only educating the kids when they're young, being accountable, being trying to be on time. It's hard to, when they don't drive, it's hard to be like, oh, why aren't you here on time? Well, it's because I didn't drive here. Be like, oh, you're right. Well, I can't really hold you accountable for that. But hopefully we can instill in their parents, be like, hey, you really need to get them here on time so they don't show up late, so they can line up with the proper portion of class. Or they're not walking in late while everybody else is like doing class. Now again, we all know everybody has busy lives and this and that, so if you're like, hey, we don't even get them till 6 o'clock typically is when kids class start, and we can't get them here till 10 after, that's okay. It's like you're letting me know, be like, hey, their on time is 6 to 10 after them. So it's like, okay, they're technically on time. That's when they told me they were going to be here. So I think that it's interesting because we went from accountability and responsibility to the on-time topic, which I think goes hand in hand.
I think if you had to build accountability, is be where you are, be where you're going to be when you say you're going to be there. That's being on time.
I would definitely agree with that.
That's fundamental. I ran a management club at University of Utah when I attended my last year there, and we held a few board meetings, sort of a mock meeting, and I said, you know, the one thing you can do is show up when you're going to show up, because if you're the only one there, you'll get noticed because you're the only one that's there on time. You make it seem like whatever event you care about, like whatever. Let's take martial arts. You show up on time or early for your group class, for your test. That tells the instructors, that tells the teachers there that, well, I care about this.
And it also shows that you're respecting their time.
Yeah.
That's another big thing as well, is being on time. It really lets the people around you know that not only you're respecting your time, but you're respecting other people's time as well, especially if you're meeting somebody, because they're taking time out of their day to meet up with you. It's almost a polite thing to do to show up on time with them and be like, okay, well, you've taken the time out of your day. I need to make sure I'm being accommodating to that and not wasting your time by being late. But I like that, like, show up when you say you're going to show up. If you say you're going to show up at 10 minutes before, like, hold yourself accountable and show up 10 minutes before. I mean, it sounds like it's not rocket science, but yet it's hard to do for a lot of people. So, but like you alluded to earlier, it's a muscle, and if you don't practice it actively, it goes away. It's a very much a perishable skill. It's exactly like martial arts. I mean, you can learn martial arts, and then all of a sudden, if you stop training for a while, you know it a little bit, but your skill level's not there. It's a perishable skill. Accountability and responsibility is a perishable skill. So we actively have to pursue situations to enhance it and have our ability to flex those metaphorical muscles, so to speak. But yeah, that's kind of the first thing that came to my mind when it comes to this podcast, is just kind of getting the word out there in terms of like what we're seeing within our own studio and our own students, and how can we fix it, because I definitely don't want to be that type of listen or podcast where all they do is complain. It's like, no, we're not about complaining. We're about trying to solve problems and create solutions. So I don't know, have you ever seen that movie Kingdom of Heaven with Orlando Bloom?
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, where it's the Crusades.
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, a great movie. Ridley Scott, phenomenal director. I could talk movies all day with you about everything. But there's a great saying in that movie that's always resonated with me. And it says, "What man is a man if he does not make the world a better place?" And it's like, okay, man, that kind of hit me really hard when I heard that. Is what type of person are we if we don't try to make the world that we came into better than when we came into it? It's just like if you go camping. What's one of the first rules of camping when you leave the campground? Make the campground the exact same way that you found it. Okay? But now we're trying to take it a step further. It's like we came into our world like this. I want to leave the world having it looking better than when we started. And that all starts with individual accountability and responsibility. Because how can I help someone else if I can't even learn to help myself? You know, it's that whole biblical proverb, don't remove the speck out of someone else's eye when you have a plank in your own. Very, very much so. I mean, we're in a society, and you see those wild videos all over the internet of these people screaming and hollering at people, trying to be self-righteous about what they're doing wrong. And yet the act of how they're taking care of it is in and of itself wrong. So if you want to help make the world a better place, you got to make sure that you're helping yourself become the best version of yourself. And I think one of the best two ways of doing that is through personal accountability and responsibility. Obviously, there's a lot more than that, but I think those are some of the two core fundamentals that are the easiest to take control of. It does take effort, and it does take some mental toughness, but that's something that we can all kind of work towards, if that makes sense. Well, what do you think?
I agree. I think it's definitely something we could all work towards. It's definitely something that doesn't have a cap. It doesn't have a limit. You can never be perfect at it. It's something that you can find areas to improve on.
Yeah, I've never heard of anybody being too accountable.
I am the most accountable person ever.
Yeah. Yes, everybody should bow down because
My
I'm
weakness is
accountable.
I'm too accountable.
You're too accountable. Yeah. No, exactly. You never hear any of that sort of stuff. Ever. In fact, you never really hear people talk about accountability. The only time you hear about people talking about accountability are successful people. Successful in whatever field or manner they choose to be in, whether it's successful as a family unit, successful in a business unit, successful as in a health unit, like whatever. People that are truly successful are the ones that are talking about accountability and responsibility. Everybody I listen to, everybody I talk to, everybody I read about, man, they hammer that accountability and responsibility home almost on a daily basis. So that is definitely something that we could always strive to be better at for sure. So we love to hear people's feedback on that sort of thing. If you have comments or if you feel like we're onto something, we'd love to hear that. Or if you have something you feel like you would like us to talk about, please leave a comment, and we will do our best to address those. But before we finish up the show, our first show, I guess we'll kind of talk about things that we've got coming up. Next weekend, September 23rd, we are having our yearly leopard test. So here at the dojo in TruMotion, we study the movements of 5 different animals: dragon, tiger, leopard, crane, and snake. And we do an animal test for each different animal, and that kind of enhances the characteristics of each animal and allows the student to immerse themselves into a deeper understanding of what it is that they're doing and training for and all that stuff. And the leopard test is probably one of the more fun, interactive tests we do every year, where we actually go down to Provo and we go to the class ropes course, where we do things like rock climbing and rappelling and skill building drills and team building drills to really kind of help students learn how to kind of conquer a little bit of the fear of doing the unknown. Because a lot of times we run into obstacles and we freeze. And that fight or flight comes in big time, and when you're doing something physical, the flight comes in, but when you're climbing up a big tree, the flight can't really happen because that would involve falling off the tree.
They tie you down so you can't run away.
Pretty much, and people end up free, like literally, they become frozen. They can't move, and they learn how to push past that fear and that anxiety. And man, it's a great test. So that's coming up next Saturday, September 23rd, and then in October we've got 2 things actually. We have a Orange County tournament October 7th, I believe, and that obviously, if you like to travel and like to go down to California, that would be a great one to do. But then we have our tournament, our South Jordan tournament, or not South Jordan, our Utah tournament is October 21st. And as we get closer to the tournament, hopefully we'll be able to grab some of the out-of-towners in for an interview and talk about the importance of competition. Because competition done correctly, I think, is another thing lacking in our world today. It's either it's too competitive or it's not competitive enough. So we'll get on the competition topic and competitiveness probably in the next couple of weeks, because I think competition is good. Competition helps elevate everything that you're trying to work on, but it has to be done correctly. So, yeah, that's kind of like that's pretty much what we've got coming up the next couple of months. So, but yeah, no, anything you like to add? How's your week been going?
My week's been pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I know you're still working on your narration stuff, right?
Yep, working on my media company. Narration's going pretty good. Actually started using a couple of the... I wrote up how to do certain entry-level forms, right? Pin on one. And as part of my prompts, as part of my demos, I want to do one that's like, hey, if you need me to do a voiceover for an instruction, like, give me this. So I wrote out the instructions on how to do that form, and I recorded it.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you basically narrated the form?
Yeah, it's very similar to our website.
Okay. Did you do it encompassing with the videos, or you just...
I didn't do the video.
Okay, you just took the movements of it and kind of wrote it out and was like, I'm going to narrate this out and just kind of see how it goes?
That is correct.
Honestly, I think that's awesome, because well, there's all sorts of forms of learning. I mean, we have visual, audio, and kinesthetic, like physical learning. So, yeah, we definitely have the visual learning with the videos. I think it's great if, like, people that aren't visually learners, they have the audio learning now, or they have the ability to listen to somebody talk themselves through it. So that's fantastic. That's way cool.
Yep. How's this week's classes been?
Classes this week have been really well. We've been really focusing on tournament prep. So how we've broken down our classes is our juniors classes are on Monday and Wednesday. So every Monday, we're working on the forms that they need to know specifically for tournaments. So we break them up into groups like white belts with white belts, yellow belts with yellow belts, so on and so forth. And those individual groups will work on that specific form the whole class. So, I mean, and everybody will rotate in terms of like who will get instruction, who's getting this, who's getting that. So everybody will get some hands-on training and learning. And then Wednesday, it'll be skills for their forms. So, for example, this week, the skill that we were working on was the basics of half mooning, which are in all our forms. And then we encompass some punches with it and all that stuff. And we basically did the same thing for our little tigers and our teens and adult class, which are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Tuesdays for teens and adults, we work on the form specifically that they need to work on for tournament. And then Thursday, we worked on the skills specifically to put into forms, which this week was the half mooning. So then we have sparrings on Saturday, which will work on point sparring. And yeah, we just really want to make sure that everybody feels ready and comfortable and confident to perform in the tournament. So we need a good showing from South Jordan. South Jordan's unfortunately been lacking in the participation portion the last couple of tournaments, and that's kind of embarrassing. So we want to make sure we change that around. And again, accountability, that all starts with me in that instance. So I need to make sure I'm doing a better job of making sure our students feel prepared and comfortable with competing at the tournament. So, but yeah, no, I mean, classes have been great. I'm super stoked summer's over now. I used to love summertime. Now I'm like, oh, I can't stand it. Their routine's thrown off. But summer's basically over, and we've got a lot of students back from summer vacation, and yeah, things are starting to roll really well. I mean, it's definitely a process, a never-ending process, but wouldn't have it any other way. So, but again, thank you for joining us on our first episode of True Talk with TruMotion. Again, if you would like to hear certain topics or discussions or anything like that, please drop us a comment. If not, I think we said in our demo last week we were going to have some sort of catchphrase. What was the name? Kicking it? Well, kick it with us next week.
Kick it with us next week.
Yeah, so kick it with us next week for some more True Talk with TruMotion, and have a wonderful day, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Bye.